Alright, Chapter 2, Safety, Health, and Firefighting section. And then we're going to go back to the front page. Field Manual 1067 1, Headquarters Department Army. Concept Equipment, Petroleum Operation, Distribution, and Proof is unlimited. And we're on page 12, which is Chapter 2. Alright, Safety, Health, and Firefighting section. Section 1, General Safety. The General Petroleum Safety. Handling petroleum product with the present with a unique safety. Hand with the help of the handling petroleum oil and lubricant with the product with the core likely and very safe with the capture with the petroleum oil and lubricant receipt storage in sheet with the safe product. Table 1, page 2 lists some of the general safety procedures and explosion fire caused by ignition combustible mixture of petroleum oil, lubricant, and vapors. Air causes some of the most of the unserious petroleum oil, oil lubricant related accidents, thus controlling the petroleum oil, lubricant, vapor formation, ignition sources at all times critical. Table 2.2, page 2.3, table 2.3, page 2.4, give control method. Table 2.4 and page 2.5, give safety precautions unique to the petroleum oil lube transfer storage. Safety training. Safety training with the key to prevent an accident with the safety training must start with the training of the soldiers. Initial entry for the training with the must continue throughout this military ship. All fuel handlers should now know about the petroleum must know the safety principles of the handling of the using petroleum product. With addition, they should know self-care techniques, fire prevention, first aid, emergency safe procedures. Petroleum fire and explosion hazard for the primary danger for the handling of the petroleum and chance for the fire and explosion for the paragraph that describe the petroleum property with affecting flammability, explosive for the character of the also discusses issues and techniques related to reducing chance of fire and explosion when storing the handling petroleum product. Here are some terms you must know. Flashpoint. A fuel flashpoint is the lowest temperature the fuel vapor will catch fire with monetarily flash will be exposed into a flame. Lower than flashpoint with the more dangerous for the sum of the flashpoint with the Abe gas is negative 50 below zero. JP 410 negative 10 degrees below Fahrenheit and JP 8 100 degrees Fahrenheit. These flashpoints show the fuels give off ignitional vapors and temperatures normally found with the Army units. Aviation-related fuels can be ignited even in sub-zero temperatures. Explosive with ranges. Petroleum vapor to air may be the range of the mixture of the flammable possible. Explosive with the range of the call with the mixture flammability. Limited explosive with the range. Explosive with the war. Explosive limit. The mixture of the explosive with the range. Ignite with the which of the contact spark the flame of the other ignition. So within the open space with the call with the extent of the fire. Enclosed space with the size with the empty tanker. The mixture with the explode. Gasoline explosive with the range of the example is than 1 to 8% of the volume of the gasoline vapor given the air volume. Air mixture about 8% of the volume of the gasoline does not ignite because if it's too rich. For example, there's not enough oxygen present for the burn with the fuel. This is known as mixture upper explosive limited. Mixture is less than 1% of the volume of the gasoline does not ignite. It is too lean. For example, there's not enough fuel in the air to burn. This is known as the mixture lower explosive limit. A mixture with a low exposure limit is formed at the product with the flashpoint with the Abe gas vapors that can burn explode with the temperatures less as low as negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So the ranges vary with among fuel type of the form over the temperature range normally found within the military. The key point is empty or nearly empty petroleum tank container is still very dangerous due to the remaining fuel vapors. Our table 1, petroleum safety precaution, no smoking signs, fire extinguisher, flame, spark producing equipment proof, the tools, equipment bonding, notch handling, spills, leaks, inspection, ventilation, fuel vapors, protective clothing, work area, first aid training, solvent, flame, or spark, and arresters, nylon cloth. Table 2, avoid spills, drip pans, catch basins, absorbent, with material, inspect frequent leaks, clean up spills at least once. Leaks at once. Beware of flammable vapors. Empty containers. Inspect drums, containers before use. Keep drum containers closed. Open drum bunks carefully. Beware of unventilated spaces. Do not use gas or gasoline for cleaning. Consult others when conducting ventilation vapor-free operations. Table 3, precautions controlling ignition sources. No smoking, no matches, cigarettes, or lighters, no handling product during the electrical storms, disposable waste. Explosion proof the equipment, tools, equipment bonding and grounding, notch high handle wheel spills, leaks for inspection, ventilation, fuel vapors, protective clothing, work area, first aid training, solvent, flame resistant, nylon clothing. Precautions transferring, storing petroleum bugs, bonding, grounding for all petroleum operations, always bond and ground the equipment, avoid overfilling. If you can avoid overfilling, pull the filling line inside of the tank of the fuel with a distributed as possible. We'll use walkways, always use walkways across tank firewalls. Always walkway as much as possible. Ventilate cleaning vehicles and containers. Collapsible Tanks, railway, tanker cars, tank vehicles that must be clean when ventilated is prescribed in the field manual. Observe the safety rules when refilling aircraft. Observe all safety precautions described in this chapter. Observe all safety rules in operating and loading transfer products. Observe all safety precautions described in this chapter. Your vapor pressure is the measure of fuel tendency of the formed vapors is known as the volatility. Labor technicians normally use the Reed method to determine liquid vapor pressure. Determine the vapor pressure over the 100 degrees Fahrenheit comparison of the purpose of the known liquid vapor pressure. Little practical application petroleum handled with the petroleum product with relatively high vapor pressure for the particular with the gasoline aviation fuel high vapor pressures. There shall also easily fuels for the explosive vapor mixture with the normal temperatures. Your distillation range, the petroleum product mixture of the 100 of the different chemical compounds, the boil vapor overs of the relative of the broad temperature of the range compared with the pure substance, the temperature range of the product with the distillation range. First distillation range is another relative of the volatile indicator. A product of the relatively low distillation range must send vapor out of the hoses and pumps called vapor locks. Aviation fuel, particularly with the distillation range, temperature range encountered during the military operation. Electrostatic susceptibility is relative to the degree of the fuel that was taken on and built up a static electric charge. Aviation peculiar fuel GP4 in particular has relatively high electrostatic susceptibility with multiple dangers of high voltage, volatile, flammable fuels. Auto ignition temperature. Lowest temperature from the fuel itself is the equivalent of the vapors which catch fire spontaneously. Some of the sample the auto ignition temperature for the AVE gas 820 degrees Fahrenheit to 960 degrees Fahrenheit, JP4 470 to 480 degrees Fahrenheit, JP8 440 to 475 degrees Fahrenheit. Low ignition temperature for the present particular have the aviation refueling operations, idling turbine engine such as a helicopter engine produced with exhaust for the temperature between 440 to 475 degrees Fahrenheit. Even after the engine is shut down, the temperature stays in the range for the quiet time. If the engine temperature radius JP4 and JP8, fuel could catch fire and explode. And this could happen if the helicopter exhaust blows one piece of the refuel equipment or fuel handler drag hoses across the hot engine. Or specific fuel fire explosion hazards. If the fire explosion is related to the specific fuel types are given as follows. Fuel oil. Boiler fuels are not flammable at ordinary temperature because of the high flash point. However, the fuel oils heated above the flash oils can easily ignite with the produced hot fire that may be difficult to put out, and the fuel oil also may have the mixed and lower flash point product with increase in flammability. Diesel fuels will not ignite at the normal storage temperatures unless they contain with a more volatile product. They easily ignite with the heated above the flash point. Once ignited, produce the hot fire may be hard to put out. The fuels spread quickly over the both land and water, burn completely. Open flame in the hot exhaust manifold can easily spray the diesel fuel from leak and sudden tank overflow. Kerosene. Kerosene presents a safety hazard similar to those of the diesel fuel and fuel oil. Kerosene is not easily ignitable at all normal operating temperatures. However, once ignited, it will form a hot fire and difficult to put out. Gasoline. Gasoline, along with jet fuels, greater fire and explosion have in the fuel discussed below. The gasoline from the explosion mixtures will serve the gauge open even the vents with the temperature of the negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Vapors from any type of the gasoline spill easily the explosion from the mixture. Gasoline vapors, all petroleum vapors are heavier than air. They cause them to spread a long distance along the ground and collect with low spaces. Some vapors ignite easily, but the resultant flash explosion will travel the back of the fuel source ignite it. Preventing small gasoline leaks is difficult, therefore always danger ignition with a sparking flame with the gasoline storage and handling areas. Prevent gasoline vapor accumulation from the proper storage facility, ventilation, and maintenance. Never allow gasoline to enter any drain line or sewer not designed to handle petroleum products. Or your jet fuels. Jet fuel flammability character vary. Fuel grade, however, the following are the same safety precautions when handling all jet fuels, particularly important with large storage and handling sites where tanks and equipment that handle several different types of fuel grade. JP4 present with the most extreme safety hazard. JP8 replacing JP4 as the Army's primary aviation fuel. However, JP4 is still used in some areas. JP4 is very dangerous because it forms explosive mixtures Over normal storage and operating temperatures also create large quantities of static electricity when pumped and handled. Follow these precautions when storing and handling jet fuels. Use a small storage tank necessary to support the mission with using hard wall storage tanks. Avoid shallow tank, large surface area for jet fuel storage available to floating roof storage tanks. Do not use overhead fuel lines to permit product free fall. Keep air out of the fill lines. Use water bottoms in fixed tanks for the only absolute necessary. With the use water bottoms, keep inlet connections above water to reduce agitation. Water that entrained air rising from the fuel creates a static electricity charge. Bubbles bursting on the fuel surface also create electrical static electricity. When pumping fuel, you should pump at reduced flow rate until the fuel submerges in the tank inlet. Also reduce the pumping rate when the fuel level is near the tank top to reduce the risk of the flash over to the parts of the roof. Only check bonding and the grounding connection. Take special care of the bonding, grounding cable, gauging, and sampling equipment properly. Alright, fuel properties behavior after combustion. Other fuel properties determine the behavior of the after ignition, determine the fuel explosion, control measure for the properties that are given below. Heat of the combustion, one relative to the measure for the fuel, intensity of the severity of the amount of the heat produced in fuel burns. Aviation peculiar fuels, JP4, AVE gas, higher heat of the combustion, multi-purpose motor fuels, therefore produce the most severe fires, and they allocate for the petroleum fires intense. They require prompt action to quench large amount of the heat they produce. Flame spread rate. Aviation fuels contain gasoline, kerosene, mixture, Jet B, JP4. Flammable speed rates approximately 700 to 800 feet per minute. Kerosene base, JP5, JP8, Jet A1, and diesel fuel 2 will have fuel rates approximately spread at 100 feet per minute. The flame spread throughout a mist of any of the type of the fuel is nearly instantaneous. Use specific gravity. Specific gravity is relative to the measure of liquid density of the water. Specific gravity is 1.0. All products have a specific gravity less than 1.0. For example, the AVE gas specific gravity is 0.70. JP4 specific gravity is 0.78. This means that lighter than water will float on any of the water surface easily. Using water to petroleum fire will cause the speed of the petroleum carried along with the water stream flowing away from the fire. For this reason, use foam to dry chemicals and is possible to put out petroleum fires. Solubility. Fuels will not dissolve in the water. This means water-based foams can be used to putting out petroleum fires. Flammable combustible products. Heavy liquid and petroleum products are classified in flammable combustible. In these broad categories, subclass designation based on liquid volatility. Flammable liquids class 1 have flash points below 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Vapor pressure does not exceed, and the vapor pressure is not above 40 psi at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Combustible liquids, class 2 and 3, have flash point above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In table 2.5, describe the various flammable combustible liquids. Heat liquids are more volatile. Therefore, heated combustible liquids require some safety precaution flammable liquid. And it shows class 1A, A, B, and C. Combustibles 2, 3A, and 3B. Hard ignition sources. For fire explosion needs, the ignition source to start with the petroleum storage handling as well as the concept of the monitoring to detect eliminating ignition source. Some of the common ignition sources are as follows. Smoking and matches or smoking matches are a great single cause of the fire. With the units operating class 3 supply points should be prohibited. Smoking related material within the supply point. Collect all smoking material, entrance checklist, and the checkpoint, returning the items at the exit point. Post no smokings within 50 feet sign with all the petroleum handling and storage transfer area. Poor housekeeping. Relatively small heating, easy ignition, trash rags, scrap wood, other such items placed. Such materials in closed metal containers. So of them appropriate each day. Each oil and fire resistant wall locker and cupboards or storage and petroleum supply area. Never store newspaper or rags in them. Discard petroleum waste, environmental safe water in accordance with local procedures. Label safety cans are flammable liquid containment and flash points below 100 degrees Fahrenheit, such as gasoline JP4, in accordance with Title 49, Part 172. Waste the cans larger than 10 gallons. Take steps to control gas and weeds, petroleum, oil, lube supply points. Mechanical friction. Spark friction impact between metal with other hard substances can cause sparks igniting flammable products, rubbish. Carefully control source of the tools and grinding wheels around petroleum product vapors. Non-sparking tools may cause sparks in certain uses. If available, use them, however, to treat them as potential sparks also. Hard electrical equipment, the wires create with a higher head that produce the explode with electrical currents, the arcs, and the sparks, which they create excessive amounts of heat. But the arcs continue with current stream through the air with a similar limited lighting. Operating knife switch with the circuit breaker with often produce with the rotating parts of the motor generated. Similar machines produce with arc and sparks when operating an overload electrical circuit with the produce highs within two ways. One of the large amounts of the heat produced with the heat made enough to ignite the petroleum vapor mixture of the second in the arcing through worn or thin insulation, oil insulated switch or circuit breaker designed with a quench arc from interpreted current between the hazard when overloaded because of the insulation. Oil vapors never put a penny or other conductive material to the back over the blown plug fuses. A circuit overload can result with likewise never used the fire fused with a higher capacity of the circuit needed with the fixed and portable light with the generated portable tools. Extension cord designed with the same head with the only explosion proof with electrical equipment. The flammable variable exists. Equipment should comply with the underwriter's laboratory incorporated standards. All writing and grounding must comply with the National Electrical Code. Permit only. Licensed operator to operate generators. All out. Absolutely no one to work on a vehicle, aircraft, electrical during refueling operation, include touching or moving the batteries using battery chargers. Allow vehicle, aircraft radios to be on receive message during refueling. However, they do not allow radio transmission during the arcing. Static electricity is an electrical charge built up with a material with a friction with another electrical disc material that you can grip the static electrical on yourself with rubbing your feet across the carpet. On a low humidity day, you can keep it dissipate with the charge touching the suction of the metal between the doorknob and the car door. This produces a spark and a shock with the charge dissipate with the military and flow of the petroleum through the hoses and pump it into the other metal tanks. Produce static electricity. Also flow stream in the air and other gas for the tank with a pump with these hoses to produce the charges. Aircraft vehicles move through the air and along roads produced with a static electrical buildup, and these buildup can be predicted, prevented. However, they're not in danger until the buildup into a charge that can spark. Petroleum handlers should assume presence of static electricity during the all petroleum transfer operation can prevent sparking by two methods of bounding and grounding discussed. Below, operators must properly bound ground all equipment involved with petroleum transfer operating with the starting operation. Effective bonding and grounding must continue with the entire operation. Petroleum handlers should inspect ground wires, rods daily. They should repair any of the damage immediately. They should test the grounding system every 5 years. They should also test if the repair of the damage. Static drag chains used in civilian vehicles dissipate static electricity are not authorized in military vehicle. Or spontaneous heating of the combustible material takes the character of the right environmental condition of the heating and produce chemical reaction. The heat can build up to the point where the material that ignites its own on its own. This is called spontaneous combustion. It may happen even if the material is not exposed to the external heat source. One of the most common sources of the spontaneous heating in oils, paint, soaked waste rags, particularly with the soak with linseed oil, and paint dry. The petroleum handlers should consult with the material safety data sheets for the products handled to see if they are subject to the spontaneous heating combustion. If so, what are the conditions? Many of the factors affect the speed of the spontaneous heating combustion. The process of the takes seconds a week for the same result with the oxygen air with the oxygen producing chemicals oxidized or accelerated with the process. Here are simple ways to help prevent spontaneous heating of the combustion. Closely follow storage and safety instructions on all MSD. Material safety data sheets keep storage handling area with the petroleum-based items properly vented. Do not use lockers, supply cupboards, oil to store oil, waste slag, skins that place with the airtight metal containers. Scrub them as soon as in accordance with and environmental safe local procedures. Welding and cutting. All welding method presents fire hazards with welding associated heat caused by the increase of the petroleum vaporization. Welding throws off the melting globes which ignite the vapor to liquid petroleum. Welding equipment to open flame with igniting vapor. The welding may not ignite vapors immediately, however they can start to smolder fires in the material near air with it. Eliminating the hazard complete with a difficult and impossible. However, this is involved with welding and petroleum products. Equipment that most closely omit the welding process to prevent fire and explosions. Thoroughly clean and reduce vapor to an acceptable safety level of the storage tank of the tank, car, tank, vehicle, the drum, the vehicle, the tanks. Before cutting and welding them, check local policy if they're doing so. The work. Usually, you must get a permit for the local fire marshal before starting radar. Or the beam of high-frequency radar, equipment that can ignite with flammable vapor air, mixture they ignite with a mixture that induce the heat of the solid material of the beam spat with intensifying the existing electrical charge. Take current with the point with the arc will discharge with the spark. Degree of the danger depends on the radar unit, peak, sperm power, outlet. Some of the radar types are more dangerous than the other. Safety measures. Following safety measures: handling of the fuels near the top of the radar. Airborne weather mapping radar. The crew of the aircraft with weather mapping radar unit must shut down the radar before and during after aircraft refueling. Airborne surveillance radar. Airborne surveillance units must shut down the aircraft approach within 300 feet of the refuel storage area. Airfield surface detection radar during fuel. Aircraft with a store of aviation fuel within 100 feet of an antenna of an airfield source detection radar. Airfield approach with a traffic control radar. Do not refuel aircraft store aviation fuel within 300 feet of the antenna. Airfield approach traffic control radar. Open flames. Alright, any open flame will ignite the flammable vapor. Make sure do not allow any open flame device, liquid smoking material within 50 feet of the refueling. The fuel hazard material may not carry lighters and matches. Not use exposed heaters of the welding, cutting torches, flare pots over the 50 feet of the refueling operation. Static electricity control measures. Static electricity is impossible to eliminate. However, several safety measures for controlling it in effect with the petroleum handler should always assume that electricity is present during all phases of the operation, including the long-term phase storage, sparking subsequent fire and explosion. Static electricity is a real and ever-present danger from the petroleum transfer operation. Two primary static electrical control methods are bonding and grounding. Bonding is the connecting of the two electrical conductors of the object with the equalize the electrical potential static charge on them. Bonding of them dissipate with the static electricity. Equalizes the charge on two objects with the starting of the spark with the presence of the flammable vapors. This must likely occur with the vehicle and aircraft being fueled. In this case, the fuel handler should bond the refueling vehicle to the vehicle being fueled. Doing this by touching the fuel with the nozzle of the vehicle before the nozzle dust cap the fuel tank is removed, remaining the bonding until the refueling operation complete. Nozzle, the dust cap, the vehicle fuel cap are replaced. This will reduce vapors and cause case of spark occur with the nozzle touches bonding. All equipment must be being used in petroleum handling operation. Alright, grounding. The earth, particularly with a soft damp earth, again, except for the electrical charge of the charge for the dissipate harmlessly for the ground. Equipment must provide with conductive electrical path of the ground to prevent the static charge of the collecting on surface equipment with the discharge of the spark with the fuel handlers from inform this path of connecting the conductive cable of the piece of equipment, the conductive metal rod driving into the earth tube at the level over the permanent ground moisture. Connection of the equipment must be clean, unpainted, non-oxidized metal surface frozen, and particular problem in the Arctic region making it difficult to get a good ground. Fuel handlers may need to drive and ground rods several different locations to get depth as possible to ground a single piece of equipment. Another solution is to locate grounding system near a heat source. If there are metal buildings and grounding pipes nearby, a grounding connection may be made by them. Rocky and sandy soils or poor grounds because they have low conductivity. Chemicals and the condition of the soil raise the conductivity. Magnesium sulfite, epium sulfate, copper sulfite, blue vitriol, calcium chloride, sodium chloride, and common table salt, potassium nitrate, saltpeter are some of the chemicals used for soil conditioning. Table salt will probably easier to get the field. Use the salt with the proper grounding site with digging a hole about 1 foot deep, 3 feet across. Mixing 5 pounds of salt with 5 gallons of water. Pouring the mixture into the hole, allowing it to seep. And install the ground wire and keep the soils around the rod moist. Ground rods are usually made galvanized iron and galvanized steel with copper welded steel. The rod regularly used for grounding of the LIN S08698 and then its national stock number. The ground rod 3/4 inch diameter, 6 feet long, is made of galvanized steel and has one pointed end the driven earth and the bolt and a bolt nut on the other end of the connecting the ground and the cable using following procedure. Install mark test inspection ground rods. Alright, install. Drive the rod of earth with a special sufficient depth below the permanent ground moisture on fixed aircraft with a ramp. Drive the rod depth at the top level of the surrounding surface. All other facilities drive the rod depth at the top of the level, low enough, high enough so that people do not trip over it. If the rod is top level and surface remove some of the soil around the top, given the room to attaching the ground clips. Fuel handlers may use tie-downs, bolts embedded in the concrete ramps, fixed airfields, ground connections. There may resist the requirements. Make ground connections, tie-down bolts on the eye bolt before itself and not tying down ring. Mark and circle each rod installed with a hard surface permanently, semi-permanent with the 18-inch diameter yellow circle with 2-inch, approximately 5 centimeter black border surrounding it. The circle must be painted stencil black words, static ground connection, numeric alphanumeric identification code, circle yellow portion, local policy conditions, determine the fixed rod number and spacing. No requirements exist. Temporary ground rods this way. Test. Observe the ground rods daily damage. Test them after installation every 5 years after when observe the damage is discovered after any damage repair. Appendix F, the detailed testing procedure. Are your testing requirements and effect of the ground system resistance set at 10,000 ohms or less? The unit or agency maintains fixed ground system will keep log and identify each rod date test if the resistant reading of the rod measured resistant greater than 10,000 ohms. Immediately mark the rod defective. Do not use remove the replace as soon as possible. Equipment testing ground system multimeter, most commonly used multimeter TS352B-U or LIN M81372 national stock number grounding and bonding test method. Not quickly easy way to test the ground adequacy testing procedure. The appendix F, the relatively complex required testing equipment in bulk, expensive for the reason several approved grounding and bonding methods level to the Army. Various operational needs are given below. Method 1, equip the grounding rod with the rods resistant equal to less than 10,000 ohms with the rods are ground refueling the system and tanker vehicle aircraft being refueled. Addition, fuel handler bonds and the refueling nozzle aircraft vehicle, which refueling method 1 is an acceptance ground method unusually unless granted exemption of the appropriate authorities of the air. Any air fixed revealed refueling point is safety method. Method 2, in some instances, if the equipment is not available to test screening for ground, in such cases, the fuel handler can ground fuel the equipment untested ground system sustaining subject to certain constraint of the unit commander authorized the method, location, tactical situation, type of the operation makes it impossible to test the ground rods to mark with the manner appropriate fixed rod with the ground rod and rods are driven into the specific depth of the ground depth of the type of the shovel. Table 2.6 of this side of the depth is determined the normal depth of the permanent ground moisture for the various soil types. Fuel handler grounds refueler with the vehicle aircraft refueled and grounded with the nozzle bonded with the aircraft. The method only when absolutely impossible the first method. And this required with the depth of the ground rods. Coarse ground, covalent sand granules 6 feet. Inorganic clay, gravel, clay, gravel, sand, clay, sanding clay, gravelly, silty clay 4 feet. Silty gravel, sandal, silty sand, stit, peat, buck, muck, and swamp 3 feet. Alright, method 3. In situations, certain climate, certain terrain, tactical conditions make it impossible to satisfactory ground road authorization. Commanders waive the requirement of the ground aircraft vehicle being refueled and fuel dispenser system refueler. Authorized commander of the commander one level above the operating unit. However, they cannot waive the requirement of the bonding of the fuel dispensed of the vehicle with the aircraft with the circumstances. Method 3 relies on bonding alone. A bond is made between the aircraft with the refueling, the refueler, and between the nozzle of the aircraft. Contact between the unbonded object and the system could produce the spark that can set off an explosion or fire. Authorizing commander with the method 3 commanding one level above the operating unit. The least desirable the method since it does not nothing to dissipate electrical charges to ground. Or static electricity on personal clothing. Human body conducts electricity through the atmosphere of the person can build up and hold the charge at several thousand volts while working over the roads and working in certain manufacturing operation. Alright, changing charge formation. Outer clothing, especially made of wool and synthetic fiber, the builds of the charge, not only preserving the parts of both body charge, rubbing in with the whole body with the underwear. The wear takes of the charge of clothes off the moves away from the body with the electrical extension voltage and create the danger point. If the clothes are wet with the fuel of the burst into flames, remove the due to the dissipation of static electricity. Expose the nails on footwear can cause sparks. These here the danger for the air, and since fuel spilled with the refueling are common. Fuel spills, if you have vapors near the ground, ignite easily. Section 3 describes the ground cloth, clothing, and footwear of the fuel handlers. Our safety measure. Before opening an aircraft vehicle fuel ports, doing any operation which would lead to fuel escaping into the air, the fuel handlers bound themselves with the container taking hold of the with a bare hand. If an aircraft piece of the metal equipment, they should take hold of the bare metal with both hands for a few seconds. Although the type of the bonding completely discharges static electricity, equally charge of the body will charge on the equipment. Don't remove any piece of the clothing within 50 feet of refueling operation. In an area of the flaming vapor air mixture may exist in an interflammable atmosphere. After removing the garment at least 10 minutes before carrying the garment in such atmosphere. If such handler gets the fuel on his clothes, he should leave the refueling soon as the refueling is completed. He should then wet the clothes with water before taking them off. If there's not enough water at site to wet the clothes thoroughly, he should ground himself with a piece of the ground equipment taken and hold the perform before taking off the clothes. A skin irritation for the fuel is not fatal. The fire may also follow a discharge from the clothes. It can be fatal. Are the sparks in aircraft tanks? Be very careful of the first fueling a recently repaired aircraft tank, or tank of the new aircraft with the fuel with the air empty tank. Fuel and air mixture for the tank path with explosive limit. Also, fluid flowing from the creek. Large amount of static electricity ignite with a mixture of filling of the tank under these conditions. Make sure that the aircraft refueling equipment properly bound and ground properly slowly into the tank, and also maintain the steam filled with the fuel tank with the nitrogen gas display the oxygen in the tank. And the tank is filled with nitrogen and fuel may be pumped into the normal rate. Your tank vehicle operation safety. To discuss and specific consideration tank vehicle operation follows the referred to section of the aviation refueling consideration related to the aircraft refueling. Position tanker in the transfer area to heave the to over the nearest exit away from the buildings or other the obstruction of the vehicle's bikes and block routes. Um, when possible, conduct petroleum operation on level with the ground. Always stop with the engine, set with the brakes, and always check with the vehicles when in stop. Check with the wheels, place approve the clock and shock between the front and the rear of the tandem type of the rear axles. Check with the tractor, with the trailer, with the tractor trailer combinations. Space for tankers are minimum 25 feet during the transfer operation when parked to avoid congestion during the transfer operation. Provide greater safety margin. It's most desirable to maintain spacing at least 100 feet to make sure the clear escape of the route is designed for the tanker parking areas. Be aware that empty tankers are at least worth more than dangerous fuel tankers than to residual vapor. During all loading and unloading of fuel servicing operation, keep the tractors coupled to the tank semi-trailers. However, the semi-trailer is designated appropriately and administered with a temporary storage tank with a tractor that can be disconnected. Making sure that the manhole covering is open during all loading and unloading. Full service operation that prevents tank collapse in the case of the tank venture failure. When opening a manhole, cover the stand upwind with the cover to avoid inhaling petroleum vapors. Ensure receiving the vehicle, the drivers operate with a dispensing nozzle to reduce the chance of the spill, but the driver should be familiar with the vehicle and can safely fill it with the proper level. When transferring operation complete, ensure the fuel handler carry the discharge hose back to the tank vehicle and avoid dragging on the ground. Keep the cam at the top of the rear curtain over the tractor placed whenever the vehicle is carried, loading and unloading prior with the top of the curtain over the keep of the tractor must be splashed from being splashed with fuels for the vehicle's catwalks. Check pressure vacuum leaf valves frequently in cold weather to make sure that they are operating properly. Use tire chains on fuel tankers for traction on ice and snow. Take them off on dry pavement to prevent their destruction. Tank vehicle safety. The discussion progress, specifically safety set for the tank when using tank vehicles and fueling operation as follows. Post no smoking signs around the area operation. Enforce unprohibited smoking related materials around the tank vehicles and petroleum storage areas. Keep fire extinguisher man ready for you for the all permanent refueling installation. Build the cover storage deployment near the handling area of the extinguisher and the fire extinguisher material equipment. Inspect the fire extinguishers monthly for serviceability. Record. Inspect with the date, initial name of the inspector on the tag, attached to the tag of the inspector. Extinguish, bound, and ground all vehicle equipment before any operation while parked. A long period of designated parking area of the facility. Bound and grounding vehicles involved with the fuel transfer by touching the hose. Drop tube to discharge the nozzle to fill the cap before removing to keep the nozzle in contact with the fill opening of the all type times during the transfer operation. When the operation is complete, close the fill of the cover before disconnecting and bonding grounding cables. Stop operation if any attack electrical storm in the fire in the area that all possible source of vapor ignition away during the fuel transfer operations. Top load vehicles only during an emergency when authorized by commander. Top loading greatly increase the static electrically build up fuel vapors in the vehicle. Also increase the chance of fuel spill when top loading. Make sure the drop tube of the discharge hose is closely to the bottom of the tank. Pump the fuel at reduce rate until the end of the tube is covered, and which is doing normal rate. Having someone constantly observe the fuel level and preventing overfilling. Make sure electrical equipment is used around the tank of the good working condition, labeled with explosive and proof. If the equipment is available, using explosion proof with extension light with flashlights, electrical lanterns. Do not neglect normal safety procedure just because the equipment is supposedly explosion proof. Do not drag hoses across the rear deck of the combat vehicle. The near exhaust systems, the armor plates, exhaust pipes become hot during operation. Kind of damage hose that cause fire. Immediately stop fuel flow with a closed manhole covering the tank compartment fire. Avoid driving near fires. Remove fuel-soaked clothes immediately before doing this. Wet clothes with water. If no water is available, temporarily ground yourself by holding a piece of ground equipment with both hands and then removing your hands from the ground equipment and taking off your clothes. Section 2, Petroleum Firefighting. And then, we're just going to see how many more chapters, how long this chapter is actually. Alright, we're going to cut the tape there and we're going to read them in. We got 39, 38 pages, so. Section 2, Petroleum Firefighting. Testing.